Hello everyone, welcome to another awesome day of FileMaker training. I'm Richard Carlton here with this amazingly awesome gentleman over here. This is Bill. Hi Bill, how are you? Bill is awesome. So today's conversation is all about PCI, which is credit card security related stuff. And so we're going to cover all that in a couple minutes. Let me make some initial announcements here. So the upcoming broadcast schedule is right here. And so we're doing a PCI compliance, which is this credit card processing stuff. In the old days, to process credit cards, all you needed was some software that would talk to the bank and you were good to go. Since that time, there's a lot of bad actors who have stolen credit card information. People are getting hacked and having credit card information stolen. And so it caused all sorts of issues. So this is credit card processing these days is less about the money movement and more about, I think, the security. And so we got day one of that. We have another day of that on Friday, October 29th, this coming Friday. And then tomorrow and Thursday, we have first 2 days of Dr. Watson. I call him Dr. Watson. This is Hal Watson. He's a Brit who has relocated to Germany, and he has been doing a lot of amazing FileMaker debugging and other skills, things that our own Christian Olson got to talking to Mr. Watson and was dutifully impressed with the awesome things that were being discussed. So tomorrow and Thursday will be very FileMaker technical about kind of more senior level debugging, things like that. So if you're a FileMaker person, you want to dig into that, that'll be great. Then Monday next week is day 3 with the credit card processing with Bill. Bill is awesome. And we will be diving into that on day 3 of next Monday next week. Tuesday next week, we've got SSL Revisited with Klaus Levent. We're going to be covering the SSL changes with the FileMaker platform, and that will be on Tuesday, November 2nd. As a reminder, this broadcast is being brought to you in high definition on YouTube, Twitch, and Discord simultaneously, so it's like a triple cast. And if you're interested in supporting the channel, we greatly appreciate everyone who goes to fmtrain.tv. You can come here at the top. Of course, you have the button right here for the live streams, and then you can press the bundle button. This is how you support the channel. It's also how you have great access to tech support, great access to dedicated video training. There's over 100 hours. I got to fix this text. Margaret, remind me to fix this. There's like 100 plus hours of video training in here under these two bundles. These are annual subscriptions that keep you up to date. This bundle here has all our training, plus actually a legit copy, fully legal in all ways, of FileMaker Pro for Mac or Windows. It's the latest version 19. So this all is a 1-year subscription. This is just the video only training over here without any of the other side benefits. And that's a 1-year subscription as well. This is how you support the channel. We greatly appreciate it. Additionally, when people call us or email us, they reach out to us, say, I need help with something. I need to learn how to do this or that or whatever. They email support at RC Consulting. First thing we do is we look them up and they see if they have our training. If they have the training, they're going to get automatically a higher level of support from us because they are paying us, and we want to take care of the customers that pay us. They're like our tier 1 people, very important people. So we want to make sure that if you're bought our training somehow from us, then we want to make sure that we're going to answer your questions and take care of you the best we can. In fact, if you buy the complete training bundle over here, you get a free hour of coaching, right? You get a free hour of coaching. That is good stuff. If you have questions along the way, I want to encourage you to stop and ask the questions. Very, very, very important. Stop and ask the questions. We want to make sure there's customer engagement. We answer these questions for you because a lot of businesses need to process credit cards. Doing it correctly is an important thing. So I'm going to push the button over here, and I'm going to bring up the bill. Where is the bill? There's the bill. So this is Bill. Bill is a senior engineer at RCC. He is actually does multiple things for various different companies. And so we're pleased to be able to work with him at least a part of the time. And as a result of that, we found out that he is an expert at credit card processing. He's also expert at security, firewalls, very deep kind of stuff like that. So I want to welcome Bill and start, I guess, day 1 of our conversation about PCI, right? And I guess for the first people, for some people, I guess we should define what is PCI and why do we care about it?
Yeah, absolutely. We'll actually get into the definition fully here in just a minute, but the bottom line is, as with most things, learning how to develop or ride a bike or anything else, it's very much a crawl, walk, run type of progression. And the foundation knowledge that everybody needs is this PCI compliance, because when you start working with credit cards, it's assumed that you have it, whether or not you do. So the first lecture today is going to be about dry as toast. This is legalese at its best. We've made it as great as we can, but it's the bare knowledge that any developer needs to properly meet the requirements of PCI. And I'll get into all the definitions of the letters here in just a minute.
Okay, cool. All right. So good. And then if you have questions, folks, please put them in. Would be really appreciated. Lynn, Michelle, anyone else, lurkers that come sliding in. Gadidi, make sure you ask questions about this. So then, Bill, if you're going to switch to your screen, just go and do that if you want. I know it's a little bit of a PowerPoint thing here a little bit, so if it gets too dry, we will have some random explosions to keep things entertaining. So there we go.
Oh yeah, it'll be death by PowerPoint, but it's good info, and I hope it's well received.
Good. All right.
So as Richard said, my name is Bill Kaplis. I've been with Richard for going on a decade now. I was thinking about that as we spun this up. I was like, man, how long have I been doing this with you? And next March, it's going to be 10 years. So it's been a good decade, though. So let's get into the boring stuff. PCI compliance. It starts with a disclaimer, guys. Just like with anything where you get free advice on the internet, this is not meant to be a know-all session for PCI compliance. You need to read the standards yourself, and I'm going to give you the link to do that here in a little bit. If you do have any questions that we don't cover in the online portion of this broadcast, feel free to email us, support@rcconsulting.com, and we will help you get through all this tailored to whatever situation you find yourself in. And then finally, you are ultimately responsible for implementing PCI compliance. We don't get in trouble if you do it wrong. We're going to give you our best info, but Richard Carlton Consulting disclaims any and all liability for the use, lack of use, misuse, or completeness of the information contained in this presentation. So the best thing we can tell you is learn what you can and contact us if you have specific questions that maybe aren't covered in this video, because it's not like I said, an all-encompassing broadcast. So let's get into it. PCI, the full name for it is PCI DSS. And as you can see at the top, that means Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard. And that's a mouthful. So we usually just call it PCI or PCI compliance for shorthand. And historically, businesses have not done a good job in complying, for lack of a better term. And it has a lot of reasons behind that, but in short, it's because it's expensive and it's hard to do. It's technically complex. Most businesses are tiny. They don't have huge staffs. They certainly don't have a dedicated tech staff most of the time. And so they do the minimum necessary. The problem is every single merchant account provider mandates compliance with PCI. And if you fail to protect it, you can protect cardholder data, that is, you can face some real serious liability, the kind that can ruin your business. So it's a serious topic, boring, but serious. So let's get into it. We've already told you what it stands for. You can read the entire PCI DSS for yourself at the link shown on the screen, PCISecurityStandards.org. There is a ton of information there. In fact, if you add, I should have put it on the presentation, but if you put a slash and then document_library, you'll get right to the different core parts of the PCI security standards.
So what, a slash here and then a library right here?
Document_library.
Document_library. Okay, I can't really write that, but you get the idea, everyone. Okay, cool.
And then the PCI Security Standards Council is who controls this. And the Standards Council is made up of members of the big issuers, so Visa, MasterCard, Amex, Diners Club, etc. And they decide, based on historical threats and breaches, what the standard needs to be given the current environment. And then they tell all their merchant account providers, the different banks that issue merchant accounts to business owners, they determine, what they have to meet for compliance, and then they pass that on to the end user, which is the business owner or the developer.
So you have merchant account provider, which is normally the bank, or in some cases like authorized net would be a merchant.
That's a different thing, but I'll cover that in a sec.
Okay, cool. And then the merchant account holder is us. Is that what we're saying?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. So yeah, like Richard Carlton Consulting has the merchant account from Bank of America, let's say, and Bank of America has an agreement with Visa, MasterCard, Discover, Amex, that they will bind their merchant account holders to the PCI standards. So the difference is Visa, MasterCard, and Amex implement the PCI DSS in their own way. So they don't all require the same level of verifications and tests. And that's really more than this call needs to get into. The merchant account provider will tell you what to do, and that's what you have to do. So let's go on to the next one. The reason the PCI compliance came about is because it took about 7 minutes for the card holders to realize there were rampant ways for them to get breached, cardholder data stolen, fraudulent transactions, and all that stuff costs a ton of money. And so when you read through the PCI standards, you'll see that they have several merchant-based vulnerabilities that the standards are designed to protect the cardholder, the card issuers from. And the first is POS devices. So these are the things that you tap your phone on or stick your card in at the gas station and whatnot. They can be co-opted, they can be intercepted, they can be tampered with and steal cardholder data. You obviously have mobile devices, PCs, and servers. That's the stuff we use all day, every day. Wireless hotspots, you know, the people that turn their phone into one, or maybe they have them at Starbucks or at the airport or whatnot. Those are easy to compromise. Web shopping apps and sites, that's obvious. And here's something most people don't think about is the paper-based storage systems that a lot of businesses use. So when you go and you swipe your card or stick it in the POS device at Nordstrom's and it kicks out that paper receipt, there's rules about what can be on that paper receipt because businesses were storing credit card numbers wrong on paper, and that stuff can walk away from a business as well. And then obviously the transmission to and from service providers like Authorize or PayPal or your merchant account directly, and then remote access connections. So it's all pretty straightforward stuff looking at it from today's security viewpoint when we know that everything, you know, can be hacked. But back in the early days of the internet, when things were just starting to include credit card transactions, nobody was watching for this stuff. And so as these issuers were getting burned left and right, they started putting more and more restrictions on. Now, I do want to take just a moment. It's a little bit of an aside to describe the difference between Authorize.net and PayPal from a merchant account that we might get for our business. Authorize.net and PayPal are called gateway. Well, PayPal's sort of a combination, but Authorize.net is a pure gateway. And all they do is allow us to get authorizations or declines on credit card transactions and some other functions in place of going direct to our merchant account. So they're specialized to handle higher security transactions on the internet. They don't actually do the capturing of funds and all that. They pass that through to your merchant account. And that's what I meant a minute ago, Richard, about Authorize isn't really a merchant
so they're
account.
a gateway, and then so if you have a bank, say you never deal with Authorize.net, you just deal with Wells Fargo or Citibank or someone. So they actually do the gateway and the banking part of it too together in one place, right?
Yeah. So if all you do is point of sale, like retail transactions, you wouldn't use Authorize.net.
Okay.
Authorize.net is only for online transactions.
Okay.
I mean, I know people have done it in the past for physical, but in theory, it's only for online.
Okay.
So the PCI standards require any business that accepts cards to do three things to meet PCI. And the first is assess data storage, network, etc. for vulnerabilities. That means you have to test your own stuff and see if it's weak and if it's not updated, if there's a gaping hole that, you know, some malicious actor can exploit. Then you have to repair it. That seems commonsensical enough. And then you have to report and document the assessment. Now, these three things I want to state right now, and I'll repeat it later, is an ongoing process. A lot of businesses think, oh, I just do this once a year when my card issuer calls me up and says I have to do it. And that's really not the intent. The intent is to have an ongoing process of discovery, repair, and documentation to stay abreast of weaknesses in your cardholder data management so that you don't get breached. And a lot of businesses dramatically fail at this. So there's 6 core areas that a business has to meet to be PCI compliant. They're on the screen. I'm not going to read them word for word, but some of them are obvious, right? Like making secure networks and systems, Protecting cardholder data, though, is really, really nebulous, and we'll get into each of these in detail, so I'm not going to hit it now. But we're going to cover each of these, so let's just get right to it. Time is short, and this is boring. So,
well,
the first.
hang on. Anyone have any questions? Okay, so Drew is in. Ed showed up. Hey, Ed, how's it going? Kyle is here. Kyle, there will be no JSON or custom functions or SQL today, I don't think. Just have to warn Kyle. He might just hang up right now after I said that to him. And then let's see. Peter Geens is there. Okay, well, if anyone else has questions along the way, please ask. So once again, kind of a boring day, but you have to, did I say have to know this before you start doing credit card processing within your organization, right? Bill, can I say this?
That is absolutely accurate.
You have to know this before you, to legally really be doing credit card processing. So, all right, cool.
Yeah, and to avoid the liability if you don't. So
yes.
So the first requirement of PCI then is to build and maintain a secure networking system. Now, a lot of people think, well, my network's secure. I got a Linksys router and a TrendNet switch, and nobody comes in except me and my 2 employees. That's not a secure network. The standard states that you have to use a quality firewall configured to protect cardholder data. That's a loaded statement. A quality firewall means something like Palo Alto Networks or Cisco or SonicWall, not Bob's Pretty Good Firewall. Or Linksys is the one I always bag on because they're terrible. But a quality firewall costs money. A cheap one, a cheap Palo Alto, that's the one I'm most familiar with. A cheap Palo Alto will run a business $10,000 for a 3-year subscription and the hardware and everything they need. Now, every little tiny business that uses FileMaker products is not going to put $10,000 into a firewall. But the problem is they're all vulnerable. And people think, well, my business isn't vulnerable because I'm a mom and pop and nobody's going to target me. But you don't have to be explicitly targeted to be compromised. There's robots that crawl the networks of all the IPs in the world and hit it with known exploits, trying to find a way in. One business that I run the security for, they get somewhere around 50 to 60,000 malicious hits a month that the Palo Alto stops. So it's a serious problem that needs to be addressed with money and technical expertise. The next is the firewall must include a deny all policy. And what this literally means is the last line in your policy statements must be deny all. And that's because anything that's not specifically allowed should be cut. And that's something that a lot of people don't do, even in Linksys. You got to restrict access to any system that contains cardholder data to those who need to get to it. So just because, let's say you own Bob's Pretty Good Bakery and you're doing credit cards, just because your baker works there does not mean that he should have computer access that lets him get to cardholder data. He can go bake cupcakes and bread and stuff. He doesn't need to mess with cardholder stuff. And that's what that point means. And then this one's one of the hardest to enforce. You have to install personal firewalls on all your devices, business and personal, that you use on the internet outside of your secured network. So if you have a BYOD policy, bring your own device for your employees, and they show up, you don't know what sites they've hit when they're at home or driving through Las Vegas or wherever they live, hitting the internet. You don't know what's on their phone that they're going to bring to your network when they connect. And so you need to mandate personal firewalls on their devices. That's difficult and it's expensive.
I did have one comment on this, and I don't know where this fits in the thread. Oregon Dean thinks it's like imperative that I mention this immediately. Is that if this the PCI, I guess this is more of a front end conversation, and maybe we should pause just to talk about this. The PCI conversation. What if you never handle the credit cards? What if, like with PayPal or Authorized Net or something like that, you actually never touched the credit card? How much of the PCI stuff do you have to do, if any of it?
100%. And here's why. Because you're going to use cardholder data in transactions and presumably keep various records, financial and otherwise, that will have some forms of cardholder data on them. And the internet is full of breaches that have exposed cardholder data because that was done improperly.
Okay, but with PayPal and Authorized Net, you never see the card holder, the card, you have the guy's name and that's all you have, right?
PayPal handles that for us, right?
Uh-huh.
But Authorize does not. And so, like Friday, when we get into how to do authorize.net, we will actually be sending card numbers to Authorize,
Okay.
because when somebody puts their card number into our website, we have to get that to Authorize somehow. So PCI applies. And if we do that wrong, it can get intercepted or otherwise
So
compromised.
with authorized net, we don't. With authorized net, we need to do all this. With PayPal, assuming that they go to the PayPal website and abstract that entire process, then the PCI stuff. I mean, I'm not trying to weasel out of this, but people trying to figure out if the PCI stuff is applicable, right?
Well, yeah, PayPal is less important, right? Because when you hit the little buy now button, it pops the PayPal checkout.
Mm-hmm.
And presumably PayPal knows what they're doing and is protecting all the information, and you basically get back an approved or a denial. But you still want to store some of that information that you get back very carefully. If it gets stolen and the authorization code for a PayPal transaction is exposed, you're not going to lose anything. But if for any reason your website keeps protected information, you're not in compliance, even if you use PayPal. So you need to be really careful how you do the integration for PayPal.
Okay. Okay. Good point. Good point. Okay. Good. All right. Well, it's a good point. So yeah, because RCC, for example, we do PayPal, right? So we don't have a lot of this set up, but we don't retain anything beyond the person's name and email, right? So
Correct.
All right. Well, that's
which is normal customer information that millions of businesses hold. So It's not protected.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Cool.
Okay.
Not like this. Yeah. Well, go ahead. Keep going. That's fine.
Okay, well, just to round this out, you got to secure all the access points, and then you're supposed to have written policies that ensure people know what and how to do these things and that they follow them. So what's the reality? Small businesses suck at PCI compliance, and it's really just a money thing. Well, a little bit of not knowing what they don't know, like nobody would know about this stuff unless a developer told them or their issuer told them. They don't have access to good equipment because of money. And then large businesses typically underfund it because they don't want to put money into something that's not given an ROI. They see security in a lot of times as just something they have to do to the minimum level to ensure that they don't get stuff stolen. And in theory, that works, but in practice, an ounce of prevention is going to save them millions, and they don't see it. So maintenance of proper networks and the design of them too doesn't happen at the small business level, and that's a huge percentage of FileMaker users and clients of developers. People who have 3 or 4 employees, maybe, and maybe a $250,000 a year business, they know nothing about this and they have no true network design. So obviously, I can't give a treatise on network design and east-west security and all the stuff that goes with it. So if people have questions about that, they should really email us and we can get into specifics because it is a huge field. But understand, your clients, if you're a developer, your clients know nothing about this, and they have substandard or out-of-date hardware, and it's probably not updated and it's probably not configured right. So you should start there, and that is a huge stepping stone to meeting PCI compliance. Because when we talk about scans and testing the network, card issuers are going to scan the website you build. They're going to scan the public-facing endpoint and try to hack it and see if they can get cardholder information. And if they can, they're going to shut you down. They're going to shut off the merchant account until you're PCI compliant. That's the downside. Okay, next part. You got to protect the cardholder data. And like I said earlier, this is kind of nebulous. Here's the easy part. I've tried to distill this down because it's legalese for page after page after page if you read it. Don't store cardholder data. Period. End of story. If it's not stored, it can't be taken. Now, if you read the DSS, it allows you to store some data. But when we develop for our clients and we advise other developers, we tell them, do not store data. That is the 100% sure way to not lose data. Does that make sense? I mean, I think that's about as clear as it can be.
Yeah, it's absolutely very clear. And I want to point out with this is that at one point RCC would take credit cards over the phone, right? And then we would have them probe our networks and do stuff, and they would freak out because we would have, a remote access port or something like that open on the firewall,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And so we got to a point where we just quit doing it because it was way too much effort for we have 8 people here who insist that they don't want to type it on the computer; they want to give it to you verbally over the phone, right?
Right.
And it's just not a good use of our
sometimes they just aren't going to be your customer.
Yeah, they're just not. So, Dave Angel says, "Hi, Amazon stores your credit card data, right?"
They don't, and I'm going to talk about that in just a minute.
Okay.
I know what he's talking about, and he's right, and it's not complete though.
Yes.
But we'll get to that. I do want to cover the one exception. We're going to talk about this. When's the third one of my presentations, Richard? It's like Monday or Tuesday?
The third presentation, if I press the broadcast button, is Monday, November 1 is day 3.
Okay. So there's one exception about sometimes we'll store cardholder data, and this is when we use a robot to execute card transactions. This is a method that we use like if we need to take credit cards through WebDirect because it doesn't support plugin usage and that type of thing. We will store them for a few seconds while the robot executes the transaction, and then they get nuked. So that's the only exception that I'm willing to give for storing cardholder data. If you have to store it, 10 seconds is your limit. That's what you should be thinking. Okay? All right, moving on. The PCI requires you to use strong cryptography. Now, last time I checked, 99.9971% of business owners know nothing about cryptography. They know it as a buzzword. The way this is screwed up in FileMaker universe is people don't replace the shipping SSL, the temporary one in server, with a bona fide GoDaddy SSL or whatever vendor they use. Claris documentation states you can't use the temps SSL for production. And the reason this is so critical is because that SSL allows you to encrypt the traffic without you doing anything between your FileMaker Pro clients and your server. So that's a huge way to get easy cryptography for your transmission side. If you're doing a website or you're having someone do a website for you, you have to make sure that they know how to encrypt the traffic to get it to your systems without being intercepted. And we also encourage, for certain applications, encryption at rest. And before I get too far into that, I'm going to preface it by saying this is not something for day one developer to do in the FileMaker universe. There's a lot of technical requirements and some pitfalls you need to avoid for encryption at rest with FileMaker. I don't know, Richard, do you want to expand on that? That's a huge topic.
Well, mostly the biggest one is that people use it and they lose the password, and then there's no unwind on that. There's no getting around it. That's by far the biggest issue I've seen with it. There's other issues potentially, but the SSL conversation is one, speaking, which was funny. It just happened to be serendipitous. Right after your day 3, the next day is revisiting SSL with FileMaker Server with Klaus Levint, who is a big-time consultant in Europe. And he will be on the live stream here kind of in some ways following up with this. And it's quite by accident. It worked out this way, but it's... Claris has been making some changes as to how some of the SSL certificates and how some of the root certificates are validated and timed out and things like that. They changed it in 19.3, and so we're going to revisit that conversation a little bit. So
yeah, well, that works well.
Good. All right. So yeah, but do you have anything else on here? I mean, my biggest issue is I got people who just lose. They don't write it down. They lose it. I've actually done that once to myself. And we still have people who have files that are on the Cloud One service, and they can't get the files off because they didn't write down the passwords.
Yeah, and it's only shown like one time when you set it up or something.
Yes. So that to me is by far the biggest issue. So.
Okay. Well, moving on. Other ways you got to protect cardholder data is if you're gonna display the number like on a receipt or something, you can't display the whole number. PCI limits you to the first 6, last 4. I use the first format in the example there where it's like 12 X's and then 4 digits. Nobody needs to know the first 6 of their card number. You know, they know that their card ends in 1, 2, 3, 4. But the right side is legal for PCI. So if you want to display it, that's what you're limited to. And then if you ignore our recommendation to never store cardholder data, limit it as described in the PCI DSS. And there's a table that tells you what you can store. And I couldn't get it into this presentation. I apologize, but it is in that link that I gave you earlier. Okay. Further, you got to render everything unreadable where it is stored. So again, we're back at encryption at rest, truncation of tokens, use of one-way hash functions. This is all kind of high-level stuff. This is not something that Joe developer is going to do with his Learn FileMaker book. This is stuff that it takes years to really get competent at. So I recommend if you're needing to dig into encryption, drop us an email at support@rcconsulting.com, and we are happy to help you with that. And then the last one is document everything. You're going to see that over and over as we go through this. Encrypt transmissions. We're back to SSLs. Never send cardholder data via email, instant message, SMS, etc. This is huge. Richard, you said people will call in and they want to give you a card number over the phone. Well, I've had that at businesses where I've worked, and without fail, they'll put it in Slack. Hey, Bill, can you run this card manually through the terminal? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They list the number in an open Slack message. That stuff is not secure, or they'll send it via email. Hey, this guy sent his new credit card for the payment plan, that type of thing. That is verboten. You should not allow employees to do that. And your clients, if you're a developer, need to know this. This is a serious point of failure in PCI compliance. Not to mention, it's just not smart. It's like asking to get intercepted. And again, the reality, most businesses fail here. The paper realm is huge. A lot of people write card numbers down and they don't shred them. They just leave them sitting on desks. And a lot of places use third-party software that is designed for PCI compliance simply because it's easier to meet all the needs of security. But out there, we talk to them all the time. They have a FileMaker 4 database, and you look at a table and it's loaded with credit card numbers. It happens all the time. And you just can't make some people come to the light, And then you also have malicious actors. Every employee has bad actors. Somebody who's going to steal data, be, lackadaisical with protecting it. And the stuff's going to be all over the place. I found card numbers written on cardboard in stock rooms before. It blows my mind. So let's go on to the hardest part, vulnerability management program. PCI, as I said before, requires assessment, repair, and documentation and reporting as an ongoing process. And most businesses do it once a year. To go further, they mandate the use of antivirus software on all systems, and you have to keep this stuff updated. So what does this really mean? Here I am, I have my small business. I spent 10 grand on a Palo Alto firewall. It does everything except wash the dishes. I'm still getting over the Rona. This Palo Alto does all this security stuff.
Bill.
But every PC in my network,
you guys hear me?
Every Mac, they need their own antivirus. And I use Bitdefender. I've used Norton in the past. I'm partial to Bitdefender now, but there's a bunch of different vendors out there. We all know them.
Margaret, do you hear me?
And they have to be on each machine. And here's why. When you allow your users to use a machine, they're going to do things that you don't necessarily want them to do. And one of the biggest threats is, like plug a USB drive in or connect their phone to your computer, which is then on your network. And that's a point of entry for malicious software. So it's not just the firewall to keep everything out. You also have to protect the interior points of entry. And the easiest way to do that is with commercial antivirus software. And then that third bullet there, that applies mostly to the phones and the BYOD stuff that they're bringing to your office or whatnot. So then you have
hey, real quick, Bill, can you hear me?
Need for dedicated staff or contractors to monitor and test the protection program, who actually look for weaknesses. And think about the small business client that Bob's Pretty Good Bakery or whatever it is. Do they have a dedicated IT security engineer for 120 grand a year who does nothing but test the security of their network? Of course not. Is that a bit of a highfalutin requirement for a tiny business that uses a FileMaker database for basic stuff? Of course it is. Are they still required to do it? Yes. Do they? No. Do the inspecting agencies for the card issuers really hold their feet to the fire on this? As long as they pass their scans, I've never heard of anybody getting shut down. But in the perfect world that no one lives in, you're supposed to have a continual process of assessment, repair, documentation, and reporting that goes on, and you're supposed to maintain your audit logs for at least a year. So obviously it's impossible for small businesses to do this. They just don't have the money, they don't have the time. But like I said, they're still required. And the worst part is, like I have on the screen, is, you know, their internal network is generally wide open, and you can literally download Kali Linux and hack them with just the onboard tools because they don't know how to protect their own stuff. This is more pertaining to developers. If you're developing, whether you're the in-house guy or a consulting developer, it's your responsibility to maintain secure systems and apps. You have to build them securely. Custom third-party stuff has to be updated as soon as possible. That's why you always see the updates in the App Store. You know, it hits your machine saying you have 41 updates. Or you get emails saying, hey, there's a new version of Navicat out. You need to download and update. And that's because these businesses are required by PCI and other standards, not just common sense, to keep their stuff updated and secure. You're supposed to document secure coding procedures. So any large organization that has a software department or some such, they have this, and it is followed, and it's very rigorous, and it ensures that no one person or no small group of actors can slip malicious code into the code base. There's second and third party reviews. And then any change logs should be maintained as well. Now, if you're a lone developer, you know, for a small business, or maybe it's your own business, do you need to do this? Do you have to have secure coding procedures and change logs? Technically, you should. And here's a better reason why you should do this. Because after you've worked on a piece of software for 5 or 6 years and it's swollen to 250,000 lines of code, you're not going to remember anything about different parts of it. And you can go back to your documentation and figure it out. So it serves multi-purpose to have good documentation. The reality of this is it can be accomplished by any business. Whether you're large or small, you can do the documentation. You can make sure you're not putting in goofy code by checking best practices, by calling somebody like us, or bouncing it off developer colleagues of yours. Don't be shy about asking for help when it comes to secure systems, because it changes so quick. No one person is 100% up to date. All right, and then access control measures. This one is easy and hard at the same time. You're supposed to permit or deny cardholder data access to need-to-know personnel. So this is the example I gave earlier. The baker doesn't need to know what the cash register guy needs to know, right? So you just limit that through privilege sets or workflow permissions or whatever mechanism you want to use. You need to physically restrict access to your devices. That means put a locking door on your server room. That means make people log into your machine, using directory access protocols or your firewall. Don't just leave it open for somebody to walk up to a jack in the wall, plug a Cat5 in, and have them be on your network with a DHCP issued IP address. That stuff needs to be locked down. That's physical access. For larger businesses, they recommend the use of ID badges to differentiate employees from the public. Again, that's not really applicable to mom and pop businesses. Physically secure all media. You don't want to let some bad actor just walk up, pull a USB cord, and walk out with your server. I mean, that's common sense, you would think. But you can go into any number of small businesses in this country and you'll see machines sitting on shelves totally unprotected, and that's their server. Destroy the media when it's no longer necessary. That's a no-brainer. And then protect your POS devices from tampering. Everybody's heard about the gas station tamper, right? Where you go up to the gas pump and you put your card in, you hit your PIN and whatnot, and then there's a glitch and you do it again. And what just happened is there's a little piece that's input over the card reader that stole all your information, and then you got into the actual interface for the pump. And next thing you know, you have a $17,000 jewelry purchase in Sengwan Province, China. So you need to protect your devices. And most businesses fail here too, because security is cumbersome and expensive. I mean, I can't tell you how many times we have heard that first bullet point. I know all these people. They would never hurt me. Until their brother gets popped for meth use and they need bail money and whatever calamity befalls them. People are also lazy. They don't change passwords. They leave default passwords in place. You have to use good passwords. And then the reality, security really is expensive and cumbersome, but it's necessary. And then my favorite that I heard not too long ago, Richard, programming for different permission sets is a pain. I couldn't believe that, but
well, it's true.
It's reality.
It's true. It's a true statement. Well, I
Let's
can't.
see.
No, he can't hear me. I'm talking to myself.
Oh, there, I can hear you now. You know what happened? I turned the volume down on my headset.
We've been trying to talk to you for like 20 minutes, and you're just, and you're just. It's like he's like physical security on his earpiece. He can't talk to him. So
that's how you stay on schedule.
Well, you're choking, and I was trying to like help you. So why don't you just stop for a second? You have a hard stop at the top of the hour. Are you okay on time? You're okay on time?
No, I'm good. I'm good.
Okay. Take a breath. Drink something. We have questions here. We have questions. So, my client, here's this from Lynn. My client uses an online service to handle credit card payments. Okay. They only get an Excel report with the last 4 digits of the card, which is kept in FileMaker. Does PCI apply to my client?
Yes, but that sounds like it would meet the record keeping requirement. Because you're not getting the whole credit card number. I assume you're getting a transaction ID as well. Otherwise, you won't be able to track it against your merchant account. And that is okay to store as well. So it sounds like that's good to go.
But what about all the firewall stuff and all this other stuff, right? Because people are,
Well, it's a good idea if you have any public-facing IP to have a firewall. Whether you take credit cards or not, because your IP is getting scanned for vulnerabilities.
That's true. That's a whole different conversation, like the ransomware stuff. We're having that come up in a couple of weeks, a multi-day ransomware thing with Chris Moyer and Heidi Porter. Yeah, that's huge. Yeah. So the reality is that I think my answer would be is that I don't think you could take that data and extract funds with that data that they collected, Lynn, from your system. That being said, a firewall in general is a good idea, and probably not the cheapest piece of firewall on the planet. Might be a good idea as well. You don't think they're great? What is a good low budget, if there's such a thing, firewall that you would? Besides, Palo Alto is like the premium thingy, right? Isn't that?
Well, they all kind of start at the same place as Palo Alto. Whether you're talking Cisco or Sonic Wall or a low-end Palo Alto, you're looking at about $2,000 for hardware, and then the software subscriptions. But there's not a lot in that in-between space in terms of the Linksys bottom feeder and then Palo Alto. There's a huge gap. One that I've come across that is okay, and I say that with a couple caveats. First, it has to be properly programmed, and second, it has to be limited in its utility, meaning it's bare bones, and that would be a Draytech. Draytech has a decent off-the-shelf firewall, but you need somebody who knows how to program it to put it into play.
Okay.
And those are about $350, $400.
Okay, because that would be probably See, that's more reasonable for mom and pops, right? So. But you'd have to have someone to program it. David Angel keeps saying he said this a couple of times. I thought he was being clever and saying Fortnite is better than Sonic Wall. I thought it was a game, but he actually says Fortinet, Fortinet.
Yeah, Fortinet. Yep.
Okay, so is that any good? I mean,
I don't have personal experience with that one, but I would put it on par with Sonic Wall and low-end Palo and Cisco. They're a decent provider from what I've heard.
Okay. So yeah, it sounds like there is some lower cost options out there. Just that Bill's not a big fan of Linksys. All right, cool. Other questions. Oregon Dean says, this is what Oregon Dean says: if you must take a credit card over the phone, which we would never acknowledge we do, I think is what he says, we would only type it into our PayPal form, I guess on a web browser, and complete the transaction if we were the person doing it online. Forget the number and don't write it down. That's a PCI compliance issue, right? So,
well, yeah. I mean, if there was an inspector standing right there, they would not like that. That said, is it a security risk? Not really, because you're off putting all that liability onto the PayPal interface or the Stripe interface or the Square interface. The real risk to the person who does that is from an employee who maliciously takes that number and sells it or uses it. But in terms of putting it into a known or assumed secure provider, such as PayPal, there's really no PCI issue there because you're not doing the transaction. You're just initiating in the same way a consumer would. A lawyer, I'm sure, can say differently, but that's the way I see it.
Yeah. So yeah, that's a kind of the exception to the very, very exception, and it's something you don't want to talk about, but on a limited as needed basis. Cool.
I do want to go back to the person who was receiving the Excel spreadsheet every day.
Yes.
I'll go out on a limb and say that might be a somewhat outdated service. What I would compare it to would be Stripe. Stripe is a really good solution for people who may not need to go to the expense and headache of an actual firewall, and they aren't going to do any public-facing web transactions or anything like that. They just need to occasionally run a credit card transaction. And then they can go to the portal on the Stripe site, and it executes the transaction. They handle the PCI stuff, and you get emails, and you have a interface that you can work with the transactions and see. So it's a little bit more fluid, comprehensive solution than getting an Excel spreadsheet at the end of the day. That's just two thoughts that occurred to me when I heard about that, because I haven't heard of any service doing that in a long time.
Yeah, it could be an older service. I don't know. This is Lynn from Austin, and she may have been around. I think it's he in this case. Lynn's been around for a while, but I've only noticed them recently in the live stream, so he's maybe new to us. But
okay.
Yeah, but Austin, Texas. I always like it when people tell me where they're from. It's always awesome. That way we get because we have a lot of international people here as well. So
cool.
Yeah, and while a lot of the now is this piece. Let me back up. Let me ask this PCI. I mean, American Express, Visa, MasterCard. These are not like North American, United States only credit card processes, right? So
correct. So this would be a worldwide requirement. However, in Europe or in the U.S., if dealing with European customers, GDPR also applies. And that I didn't even do any research on GDPR for this presentation, but I know, like for the data deletion requirement of GDPR, you would have to delete all the remnant credit card transaction stuff that you retain. Correct. So. But that might be another presentation at some point.
There was GDPR be one. We'd have to have someone talk about that in a great way. GDPR is interesting. It's giant. I mean, it's like some of these governments, like the state of California trying to one up everyone on how to be more progressive in terms of how they deal with this stuff. Although it's one of those cases in terms of people tracking my data, right? Like that's why I hate Google so much, right? They figured out I like white powdered donuts, and that was the end of it, right? Once I wrote in an email, oh, I really love white powdered donuts, and then like a couple days later, I started getting ads, no for Dolly Madison. I'm like, how the I never went to their website. I never asked for any of this, and that was Google reading my email, literally. I do not, and
I believe it.
And so yeah. So anyway, Right. Oh, is Stripe good for setting up recurring payments? That's what Lynn just asked.
It can be. I've done some integrations for people using Stripe, but authorized.net works as well. So if you're using one, don't start using another. Just use the existing one. Meaning if you're already integrated with authorized, don't go do Stripe for recurring payments. You can do that on authorized, or vice versa. But yeah, Stripe is a pretty good provider, and the integrations are pretty straightforward. So,
okay. So then Canberra says the insider threat is the biggest threat. Labo said, yeah. About intrusion advice, do you advise using a honeypot? Now, the only honeypots I know about are when you go overseas and then the other government's trying to get to your guy. So I don't know what kind of honeypot we're talking about here, Canberra.
A honeypot is not a tool of espionage in our case. It's basically a decoy of a juicy looking target in the network to lure intruders into, and it trips an alarm and it tells you have an intrusion. There's a bunch of different ways to implement it. Honeypot is just the general catch-all phrase for it.
Okay.
but I actually talk about intrusion management systems here in a minute.
Okay.
Well, in fact, right here on the screen, use intrusion management systems to monitor the network. Honeypots would be one type. There's also dedicated IMS software that you can purchase. But again, you're getting into a network design and management realm that most small businesses just can't do. I have one business I work for where we use advanced things like intrusion management systems because they're spending $100,000 a year on security. So it's expensive is the bottom line.
Okay.
Okay, so I do apologize about the hearing thing. I mushed the volume control, but
That's fine. That's fine.
moving on.
That's
moving
fine.
on.
You're totally good. We were all having fun with it. We thought it was great. So
I just turned you off so I could move through this.
that's
So,
the problem.
all right.
Listen, we have people asking questions. Having a live audience is a giant pain in the ass. All you people out there, you're a pain in the ass, right? Because we're trying to get through this content, and then I got Kyle and this and that, and everyone's asking questions. We don't want any questions. We don't like customers. We don't like anyone even watching us. We don't even know why you're here. We hate
Let's
all
just
of
pound
it.
through this.
Pound through this and get rid of it.
Don't interrupt us.
We want to pound through it with no questions.
The experts are pontificating. So,
Now
as I pontificate,
we've been doing this for over a year. We love them, and the people tend to change, but it does happen. So, all right, go ahead. I'm listening.
all right. Oh, we're almost done.
We're almost done.
So we talked about IMS software. It's expensive. You can design a honeypot using your network, but it's not for the uninitiated. In the FileMaker universe, we mostly use server logs, and they're woefully incomplete. If anybody's looked at a web publishing engine server log to try to figure out why there's a problem, you'll realize how incomplete they are. And you can put in full audit trails, but you have to do it programmatically. And there's a couple hacks that we use to do it. And so here's one. I'll tell you right up front that you'll never see this in a FileMaker how-to book, but it's a quick and dirty trick. And you can use a relogin script step and use the username as whatever you're trying to debug. And so when it fails the authentication process, it makes a log entry saying whatever you told it to say is the username. And it creates something in your existing logs that you can track. So that's a really easy way to do it, but a good audit trail is something that should be done with the regular scripting of your solution, and it can get as in-depth as you need it to be. But in reality, small businesses don't do this stuff.
Nope.
Okay, maintain an IS policy, information security. You're supposed to have a written document where all your employees know what's expected, how to do it, and what the enforcement is, and then you're supposed to enforce it. Do small businesses do this? Of course not. It's time and money. You're supposed to have critical technology usage policies, and you don't think printing is a critical technology, right? Not in terms of how to do it, but what can be taken out of your system with printing. So you need to protect printing. Like for one of our clients, I do not let anybody print except certain people because things are so sensitive. You need to screen potential employees, and that's not calling their references and saying, "Hey, was Joe Blow a good guy?" Because chances are they gave you a fake number and it's ringing their buddy's house, and he's playing Nintendo and eating pizza and giving you a job reference. I've run into that. That has happened. I got this glowing review of this person, and so we hire him, and he's a bag of cats, and we want to fire him like 3 days later. And so finally, I look up the phone number of the business, and I call, and I say, "Hey, do you know this person?" And they're like, "Oh yeah, you don't want him. He's blah 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 blah." And I said, "Well, do you know this person?" Giving them the name of the supervisor, and they're like, "No, I never heard of him." So it happens. You need if somebody's going to have access to sensitive data, you need to go beyond looking them up on the internet and checking their Facebook. You need to do criminal records checks. And, I recommend LexisNexis. That's one of the best civilian level background checks that you can do. But even that's not perfect. There's gaping holes in that as well. And unless you're a law enforcement agency, you can't get all the info. So you're kind of limited. But anybody you give access to your network, any device you let on your network, the devices themselves, all that stuff are security threats, and you need to address it in terms of who can do what. And then you need an incident response plan. So if you get breached, what should you do? And the reality, like I said, most people don't do it. No expertise, no money, no time. And remember, they know all their employees, right? Their family, so they don't need to screen them. And then, oh crap, let's call the cops. That's their response plan. And it's woefully inadequate. And we can help you with all this stuff. If you need it, drop an email to support@rcconsulting.com, and we'll address your specific situation. But rest assured, our incident response plan is quite a bit more comprehensive than, oh crap,
Call the cops.
Yeah. And so I hope this kind of gave you an overview of the complexity of what you're facing with PCI compliance. And if you talk to one of these stuffed shirts that calls you on the phone from your merchant account saying it's time for your PCI audit, they have no sense of humor. And they think that you, no matter your business size, are going to implement every single bullet point in their little DSS. And that's just not feasible, right? We all know the size of businesses run the gamut. And most people don't have time to run their business well, let alone do this silly PCI stuff on top of it. So since most of the audience here, I'm assuming, is either an in-house developer or a contract developer, it's your job to know the basics of this and to make sure that you don't let any of these people step on their own feet. You need to look out for them. And when you're billing for this time, they're like, why do we have to pay you for this? I don't need to, blah, 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 blah. And you have to be able to explain to them, we have to do this to keep you safe and to keep you on the right side of the law here. And the downside is if they get a breach and get civil damages, they could be out of business. So it's definitely worth time to look at this from, if not a detailed perspective, then at least a wholeness perspective. Am I doing things in the spirit of PCI compliance? Even if I can't do it all because of lack of money, lack of expertise, lack of people, am I doing the basics to make sure that all this cardholder data isn't going to get hacked? If you do that, 99% of the time, you're probably going to be fine. Because no business does it 100%, not even the big ones.
Yeah, good topic today. So this is day one. For those of you wondering about this is good content. This is day one of 3 days. We're going to talk about authorized net on Friday, which will be day two of this. Then basically Monday is going to be kind of robots, Go, and WebDirect. And what does that look like, right? And how does that fit with that? So, and then the following Tuesday is SSL, kind of revisited just because things have changed a little bit. Then we've got tomorrow, of course, we've got Dr. Watson 2 days. That'll be a lot of good content coming up. This is good stuff. So
I gotta say that the Friday one's going to be the winner because it comes with a file that you guys will be able to download that has modular credit card scripts for authorized.net. So really all you got to do is plug this stuff in and you can do authorized.net just how we do it. It's nothing top secret. It's just we've done it so much that we have a tried and true way of doing it. And it really simplifies things. That said, it requires 360 Works plastic. You can do authorized.net integrations or any other integration using native FileMaker script steps, but why? For the cost of the plugin, they make it so easy. So yeah, I hope everybody attends on Friday.
Yeah, that'll be good stuff. David Angel, when buying from Amazon, they remember my credit card. Go Bill.
Yeah.
Go Bill.
I forgot that. Sorry about that, David. Okay, so here's what happens. And I'm going to cover this in detail on Friday. I'm going to actually show you how to do this. They don't store your card material. So what they do is they contact somebody like Authorize, or maybe Amazon's big enough they do it in-house. I don't know. But the mechanism's the same. So the way I do it is I contact authorized.net and I say, here's David's credit card stuff, his card number, his expiration, his little secret code, his cardholder name, et cetera, et cetera. And I send it off and I tell them I want to create a customer profile ID and a payment profile ID. And so what Authorize does is it creates a record of who David is in their system. That's the customer profile ID. And then it returns to me a payment profile ID for that card. And so the next time David comes to my site or goes to Amazon, it says, hey, you've got this credit card ending in 1234. Remember the masked number. They never show you your whole number again. They show you that masked number and they say, do you want to use this? And you say, yes. And so when you execute that order, it goes and it tells Authorize or whoever, use this profile ID and execute a transaction for $1,100 or whatever it is. And then it spits back a transaction ID and authorization code and everything else. So they do not keep your card number or expiration or CVC. All they keep is a redacted form and then the tokens that they use to access their processor.
Yep. So we keep the token, and then that token only allows that money to be sent to the Amazon account. It can't be redirected anywhere else. So all that allows, so if someone got that token and said, run this token for $1 million, it would move $1 million from the customer's credit card into Amazon, which actually has no direct benefit to the bad guy, right? Makes
Correct.
sense.
And they have to have Amazon's secret passwords and stuff to even execute the transaction.
Sure. Yeah, but there's no way to directly shovel the cash into their piggy bank. So
Nope.
It's really awesome, and it's a lot of fun on Friday. So we'll be covering that. Kyle says, of course, I've written my own with with JSON and custom functions, and because I want to use mine better than plastic, so that's fine. Yeah, everyone, that's your mileage may vary, but I can just tell you that we do use 360 products with good results. We had one customer who used 360 Works products with bad results, but the guy installed literally every last plugin on his FileMaker server and ran each one. It was like 25 plugins on the server, and then the server would do weird shit and explode. And I'm like, well,
holy cow.
Yeah. So I'm saying, like, well, you have to say no sometimes. You just have to say no. Too much. All right. Well, Bill has kicked it today, killed it, done a great job. We have any other final questions? Any from anyone? All right. Cool. Well, we would appreciate it. We'll catch Bill here Friday for another action-packed day. Margaret, make sure you reach out to Bill, and we get that file set up and branded properly. It needs to go through the branding, so the sooner we get it, the better.
Yep.
And then Stu is there live from secure undisclosed location. Stu, anything, Stu? Waiting for Stu. Well done. All right, so the Navy gives Stu a thumbs up. Good job, Bill.
All right. Thanks, guys. Appreciate you attending, and hope to see you Friday.
Just stepped up the whole way. Calm, cool, collected the quarterback. Great read, good patience. More importantly, great job up front protecting this quarterback to give you a chance. And that's all you can ask for.
Try to rally down 10. 9:25 to go here in the fourth. Short motion by Amendola from the left. Brady takes the shotgun snap. Stands in, throws it left for Amendola. Reaches up and snacks a high throw and lands inside the 10. Rolling to the 9. Ball slightly behind him, but Danny makes the grab.